But as you begin to actually think about what is happening here, there's some truth here that you can get delivered into your life. And if you take it and apply it, God will absolutely bless you. And so Matthew 17, in verse 24, we have a story of Jesus, right? And it says that the collectors of the temple tax came to Peter and asked him, "Doesn't your teacher," who is Jesus, "pay the temple tax?" And I love Peter. Right, so the tax collectors, the IRS from the temple comes and says, "Hey, your master, he pays taxes, right?" And Peter goes, "Of course he does. Yes, he does." Then Peter went into the house, but before he had a chance to speak, Jesus asked him, "What do you think, Peter? Do kings tax their own people or the people they have conquered?" And so it's interesting, right? Because Peter, he says yes, but he's going to go in the house and ask, "Hey, yo, Jesus, we pay taxes, right?" He's going to make sure, right? He was covering his homie's back, if you would say, right? He's there, but Jesus cuts him off. He already knows what he's going to say. And so he says, "What do you think, Peter? Do kings tax their own people or the people they have conquered?" And the answer to that is generally they don't tax their own people, right? If you are a conquering king, those that you have conquered pay taxes. Your family doesn't. Your close loved ones don't pay taxes. I wish that was the system we had here in America, but it's not. Right? This is a little different back then. And so Peter answers correctly. He says they tax the people they have conquered. Peter replied. And Jesus said, "Well then, the citizens are free." In other words, he's saying, right, and what Peter's really kind of getting at is, wait a minute, I don't have to pay taxes. You're the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. I'm your friend. You know, I'm in your house. I'm a citizen. Then I don't have to pay taxes. And Jesus bursts his bubble and says, "Oh, however, we don't want to offend them. So go down to the lake, throw in a line, open the mouth of the first fish you catch, and you will find a large silver coin. Take it and pay the tax for both of us." So what we learn here is that Jesus and Peter didn't have enough money between the two of them to pay the temple tax at that time. Right? But Jesus and Peter still wanted to pay it. Peter probably didn't want to pay it, but Jesus says, let's not offend them. And so the interesting thing that I caught out of all of this is that he didn't tell Peter to go and beg for it. Right? He didn't tell Peter to go, ask somebody for it. If you study Peter, you'll learn that his job, he wasn't a bricklayer. He wasn't a boat maker. He wasn't a tent maker. Anyone know what he did for a living? He was a fisherman by trade. And it's interesting that that is what Jesus told him to do. He said, "Peter, there's a tax, there's a need, and this tax that they would collect would actually be a benefit to society in their time. It would help the temple. Temple is the place of God. It's where God would speak through prophets. It's where God had ordained ministry. That's where God had ordained worship in Israel. And so they would collect from the people so that there would be enough to do all the things the temple did, feed the poor, help, the sacrifices and offerings they would make to God. And it's interesting that Jesus tells Peter, go to work. Right? And Peter goes. And I love it because it says the first fish you're going to catch. If you know Peter, and if you were like me, right, you go catch a fish and it's got a coin in its mouth, how many more times are you going to try and catch a fish? To see how many more coins you can find. Right? And we don't know how the coin got there. And this is the miracle of all of this, is that this is either some kind of creative miracle. I don't know. Did Jesus make the coin appear in the fish's mouth? Right? Was it dropped from a boat? Right? And as it began to sink down, the fish caught it. We don't know how the coin got there. We know Jesus was a miracle worker. And it's interesting because he could have, when Peter came in, he could have said, he could have been like, "Peter, you have something behind your ear." Like that magician's trick, and reached over, "Oh, look." And Peter's mind would have been blown, right? It would have been the first one of those magic tricks, that I would know. But that's not what Jesus did. He used the man's profession. He used his skills, and he told him to go. And so I believe that Peter caught more than one fish looking for gold coins. I think it's a silver coin, but a large silver coin. He went, right? And the point of it is that in going about his daily routine, his job, he knew how to catch fish. Actually, he probably wasn't very good until he met Jesus. We find that in scriptures. but he wasn't as good of a fisherman. But that's often the case. You get saved, you start living for God, and you know what happens if you're a real Christian? You become a better worker. You become a better employee at your job. You become, and actually God uses jobs to shape us, to help us, to bless us. Not always does it feel like a blessing, not always, right, but through the toils. And so Peter goes, he catches the fish, and I want you to think about it. There's enough in that fish to pay for Jesus, his tax, and for Peter. Peter has a choice. Am I going to keep that coin for myself and go use it on other things? Or am I going to be faithful and go give it to the temple tax? And the interesting thing, and the question I have, what happened to the fish? I believe Peter, being a fisherman, had lunch. And the point of all of this is, God has made it possible for us to worship him, go to work, and as we're just faithful to love God, and as God finds, he can trust us. He didn't tell any random dude to go do it. He trusted Peter to do the right thing, which was to give that which was the Lord's, and offerings besides. What is that a picture of? Tithes and offerings. Tithe goes to Jesus. It's for Jesus. It's for his work. The Bible says 10% of your increase should go to the work. That is the debt we owe, so to speak, for what all that God has done for us. And then there's an offering set aside. That's Peter's portion out of that silver coin. And you'll find that as you do that in faith, believing God to move and bless you, you'll have enough to eat. The fish will be left over. There will be leftovers that you can survive on. And that's why we ask you to take an offering, or to give an offering. That's why we take offerings. And so I want to challenge you to reach in and find the silver coins that God has blessed you with through your work and through your living. And I want you to do something for me. I want you to help support the work of God. The temple here in Verrado, the door here in Verrado, that we, as we receive these offerings, right, it's not so that Pastor Jaime can have a better life. No, it's so we can pay for the facilities here, for the instruments, for the worship. We're having an impact team come in. That costs a little bit of money in terms of feeding them and flyers and going out. And as we all come together, by himself, Pastor Jaime can't do this financially. But as we all bring the silver coins that God has blessed us, and he's blessed you with that silver coin for a purpose. It's to give it. And as you give it, you'll have more. You'll have sustenance. You'll find that David said he's never seen the righteous begging for bread. In other words, God will take care of those who take care of his house, and you will have enough to eat. So as our usher comes forward, I want you to think